Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup. Today we are continuing Case File. How are y'all doing? We're reading chapters 45 to 48 today. We're at the halfway point, and I'm so nervous and excited as I continue through this volume. It's good to see y'all here. Yeah, so I keep meaning to go back and update the little thing with the quotes in it that I showed during the break, and I haven't done that in so long. So it's very silly right now because it has a bunch of quotes from volume 1 and then like a few quotes from like a random kind of almost middle point in volume 2. And I'll get around to it eventually. We'll probably be up to like volume 3 by the time I actually update it, and then it'll be back to the same thing again. But it's good to see y'all here. Hi, Soa Bang. I'm glad you could start joining for these. So yeah, we're on page 217 for chapter 45. And I just remembered, that's right, things are angsty right now. So this might be an angsty stream again. But I'm gonna get started. Did I say what the chapter is called? I forget if I did already. It's He Didn't Care Whether He Lived or Died. That is where we're starting. Sure enough, He Yu refused to see Xie Qingcheng. It was as though he was determined to evaporate completely from Xie Qingcheng's life. Every message Xie Qingcheng sent him was like a pebble dropped into a bottomless sea. Xie Qingcheng had gone to the hospital, but He Yu was unaccustomed to the hubbub of public hospitals and had been quickly transferred to a private clinic. There, Xie Qingcheng found himself barred at the door. The next few days were also extremely chaotic for Xie Qingcheng. Xie Shui, Chen Man, the old neighbors who were worried about him, his colleagues, his supervisor. All sorts of people sought him out to ask him just what had happened that night and why his face would be projected onto a broadcasting tower by a criminal organization. On top of all that, he was also summoned to the police department from time to time for further questioning and to complete the necessary procedures. He knew that the internet was having a field day over this incident, but it had surprisingly little effect on him, as he had absolutely no time whatsoever to sit down and check his social media. Naturally, Xie Shui gave him a lengthy phone call, sobbing the whole time. She asked him where he was so she could come find him, only for him to reject the idea point blank by refusing to tell her his exact location. Henry, Shiega, this is your time to come out as gay and cancel them back. I think going offline is kind of the best bet in this situation. But as it said, it's like he kind of had no choice but to do so because he's so busy with everyone calling him. Fortunately, Xie Shui had never seen pictures of their parents' murder scene. In order to protect her, Xie Qingcheng hadn't described their parents' deaths to her in concrete detail. He didn't want her to become like him, ensnared by endless despair. Xie Qingcheng wished for her to know as little as possible. Chen Man also came to see him. Chen Man was different from Xie Shui in that he knew all the facts of the situation. He was the first to drop by when Xie Qingcheng was still undergoing his first round of interrogation. He didn't belong to Zheng Jingfeng's department, so he'd had to take time off to rush over. The moment he stepped through the door, he immediately pulled Xie Qingcheng into a hug. He was an impulsive person, but it took him an unexpectedly long time to force out a few muffled words. "Guh, are you trying to scare me to death?" Xie Qingcheng noted the dark stubble covering his jaw. It seemed that these past few days, this kid hadn't even bothered to groom himself properly. Sighing, he patted Chenman on the back. Later on, as the investigation drew to a close, Chenman once again came to give Xie Qingcheng a ride home. That day, Xie Xue had originally planned on coming along as well, but due to the continuous stress she had been under, she was feeling rather ill. Xie Qingcheng had her take sick leave and return to Moyu Alley, where she could rest under the care of Auntie Li. He returned to the Huzhou Medical's faculty dormitory with Chenman. The university faculty housing was assigned based on seniority, and Xie Qingcheng's living accommodations were more spacious than Xie Xue's. Of course, Xie Xue's dorm was filled with a mess of random junk, whereas Xie Qingcheng's bachelor apartment was essentially just 4 bare walls, utterly cold and cheerless. He should put some art of a jellyfish up. That would be so cute. Go, you should rest and lie down for a while. I'll go make you something to eat. Chenman stepped into the kitchen. He'd been to Xie Qingcheng's dorm a few times and was familiar with the place. As the rain showed word to life, Xie Qingcheng laid down on the sofa in exhaustion. Dimly, he felt that this scenario seemed a bit familiar. It was only later that he remembered. The day he had an allergic reaction to mango and got a fever, He Yu had come over and busied himself in the kitchen just like this. Oh, that's a good idea, Henry. New break scene with jellyfish. I should get a picture of jellyfish. And yeah. For sure. Xie Qingcheng opened the address book on his phone, swiping past his pile of unread messages until he finally reached He Yu's name. Their chat history was still frozen on the messages he had sent He Yu inquiring after his condition. He Yu still hadn't responded. After a moment's contemplation, Xie Qingcheng dug up He Yu's phone number from his address book and called him once again. As expected, the line went dead after a few rings. Xie Qingcheng sighed softly. He didn't even know how to coax women, much less a sulky young man. Not to mention, this was a young man who wasn't just angry right now, but also hurt and despairing. Not knowing what to do, he pressed a hand against his forehead for a long, long while. Then he wearily set his phone aside and turned to enter the bathroom. After he'd washed up and come back out dressed in a bathrobe, Chenman was in the living room setting the table. Do you want... Chenman looked up as he spoke, and his words came to an abrupt stop. He saw Xie Qingcheng wearing a snow-white bathrobe, leaning lethargically against the window frame as he lit the cigarette held between his lips. Xie Qingcheng's hair was still dripping wet, but he couldn't be bothered to dry it. Shimmering droplets of water, pregnant with some unspeakable hidden desire, rolled down his neck, slowly melting into the shadow beneath the collar of his bathrobe. I feel like in a novel that wasn't... If it wasn't Meat Bun, and it wasn't all about, like, 2 red flags getting together, the guy that Xie Qingcheng should get with is definitely Chenman. But, like, we're not reading that novel. Yes, Sir Henry. Jesus Christ. What? Sorry, can we run that back? Yeah, I'm just shimmering droplets of water, pregnant with some unspeakable hidden desire, rolled down his neck, slowly melting into the shadow beneath the collar of his bathrobe. I feel like no long legs were mentioned, but I feel like we should drink to that. But seriously, that's got to be like Chenman's perspective right now. He's just like, you just stepped out in a bathrobe. Xie Qingcheng was in a rather poor frame of mind, so he didn't pay much attention to his appearance. He took a drag of his cigarette and coughed quietly as he turned to look at Chenman. What were you about to say? Oh, I said... Chenman's face had turned red. But unfortunately, between his own terrible mental state and the room's dim lighting, Xie Ching-chung didn't notice. I said, "Do you want any vinegar? I cooked some dumplings." Xie Ching-chung said absentmindedly, "Anything is fine." Chen Man bolted back into the kitchen, turning so quickly he nearly tripped over a power strip. Meanwhile, Xie Ching-chung carried on leaning against the window and finished his cigarette. Then, after a moment's consideration, he sent He Yu another message. "About the matter at the archives, I still want to say thank you." Flakes of cigarette ash floated through the air, carried off by the wind, like sea jellies gently drifting through water. Xie Ching-chung gazed silently at his screen for a while, then added, "I'm the one who didn't think things through. I'm sorry." He actually said, "I'm sorry." He said, "I'm sorry." He knew that what He Yu wanted to hear might not necessarily be these two sentences. He Yu had been deeply hurt by the things that he had said in that video. But Xie Ching-chung didn't know how he should go about explaining himself. He couldn't explain even if he wanted to. "Good, the dumplings are ready. Come and eat." Turning off his phone screen, Xie Ching-chung walked over to the dining table. The dumplings Chen Man cooked had been wrapped and delivered by Auntie Lee. Thin skins encased a healthy dollop of spring bamboo shoots and pork blended in aspic jelly. Chen Man had scooped the dumplings out and dished the soup into a separate bowl so that the food would cool faster. Exhausted and starving, Xie Ching-chung inhaled some 30 dumplings in a single breath. It was only now that Chen Man said quietly, "Xie Ge, you need to stop doing things like this. Do you remember how you counseled me back when my brother passed? You told me that no matter how sad I was, there was no way I could change the past. That if I wanted to live on, I would have to pull myself back together again sooner or later." Xie Ching-chung didn't respond. "Henry, go, can you eat my dumplings next?" "You talked to me about what happened to your mom and dad then, too. I was just a kid back then, and I was slow in the uptake. So I asked you why you didn't keep pursuing the trail. You said that getting an answer was very important, but there are times when a person couldn't remain bogged down in the mud for the sake of an answer. You desperately wanted to know the true reason your parents died, the identity of the killer who orchestrated their murders. But if you were to risk it all for that endeavor, it would have been impossible for you to consider supporting your family. You still had a sister, and—" "Xie Shui has grown up," Xie Ching-chung said. "If this were 10 years ago, I would resist the urge to demand the truth, because the cost of obtaining it might be something I couldn't afford to pay. But Xie Shui is an adult now, and I don't have a wife or child to raise. I've been selfish for 19 years, but now that I finally have no attachments to worry about anymore, there was no way I could turn a blind eye when the clues to my parents' murder were right there." Chen Man very rarely raised his voice in front of Xie Ching-chung, but when he heard this, he could no longer hold back. "Ge, what the hell are you talking about? You're saying that if you died now, it wouldn't even matter, right? Because you successfully brought up your sister and saw us become independent, we'd just be able to accept it if you died, right? Xie Ge, how could you say that?" His voice shook. "How could you think that?" Xie Ching-chung gave no response. Chen Man suddenly felt sincerely frightened by this man. Xie Ching-chung could make a plan that took into account the safety of everyone around him, but he wouldn't factor in his own life at all. When he considered whether he could afford to die, his decision didn't hinge on whether he wanted to live, but rather if the people he was taking care of would be able to survive independently if he died. In the face of enormous danger, he was even self-destructive. You're only living for other people? You think that so long as you've made proper arrangements for everyone, then your own death doesn't even matter, right? Xie Ching-chung sighed and pulled out a cigarette. "That's not what I meant. You're not allowed to smoke anymore. Chen Man shot to his feet and pinned Xie Qingchung's hand down, snatching the cigarette lighter and box away with an ashen face. Then he tossed them into the trash right in front of Xie Qingchung. Xie Qingchung didn't get up from his chair. A long time later, he said, "Chen Man, I don't think my life doesn't matter." "Then what did you mean?" "I didn't mean anything, but one has to have priorities in life. Raising Xie Shui was once the most important thing to me. That always had to come before seeking the truth. But now I've completed that task, and I have no attachments holding me back. So seeking the truth is now of utmost importance." Chen Man's eyes were red. "But your life is also very important. To me, it's more important than the truth." Xie Qingchung replied, "You're a police officer." "But I'm also Chen Man." For a long time, no one in the room spoke. There was only the continuous tick-tocking of the clock on the wall. In the end, it was Xie Qingchung who couldn't bear seeing Chen Man like this. He sighed and changed the subject. "Sit down. Eat with me." Chen Man said nothing. "Stop fussing. Come sit." In Xie Qingchung's eyes, he was already making a concession by saying this. Though Chen Man was reluctant to concede, the pressure from Xie Qingchung's aura was too strong. He never had the power to resist it for long. He staunchly held his ground for a few more seconds, but in the end, all he could do was slowly sit down under Xie Qingchung's pointed stare and pick up his chopsticks again, even as tears dripped into his soup throughout the rest of the meal. So I was making the assumption that he didn't care whether he lived or died. I thought that was going to be about He Yu in this moment, which it probably still is. But like, it's like, no, this right now, this is about Xie Qingchung. That's how he feels. In a villa somewhere in the city, a woman's voice rang out. "What? You're saying He Yu has the blood toxin?" Liu Jishu gaped in astonishment at the person before her, only managing to digest the information after great effort. "Executive Duan, surely you're joking." Oh no. See, did we know that his parents didn't know that He Yu had the blood toxin? Like, that was something that was kept private between him and Xie Qingchung? I forget if we knew that or not. Like, I knew that pretty much no one else knew, but I didn't remember if the parents knew. But I don't like her knowing that. Duan Laoban flipped a page of his newspaper. Executive Liu ought to be happy to have a son like that. Liu Jishu dragged the red nails of her stubby fingers through her hair. Her eyes filled with shock. She muttered to herself for a while before she looked up and said to the man in front of her, As number 4, the organization has always considered him defective goods. These past few years, I've raised him just like an ordinary patient. I never thought that he would have a disease-linked ability, nor have any of you found him valuable as a potential research subject. So the organization, they're like interested in psychological Ebola. Like, they're seeing He Yu as a research subject. That's a problem. Duan Laoban smiled. Then it's clear that it's only natural for humans to make mistakes. She didn't reply. During the investigation into the patients escaping from Changkong Psychiatric Hospital, it was discovered that both He Yu and Xie Qingchung went back into the burning building, he said. After they re-entered, a lot of patients were rescued at an unusually fast rate. They told the police it was because some of the doors didn't have padlocks and were only bolted from the outside. That explanation might be able to convince the police, but it's not enough to convince either one of us. Duan Laoban took a sip of his strongly brewed pure tea and said languidly to Liu Jishu, "However, Executive Liu need not worry. Since He Yu is your son, he's one of ours." Liu Jishu's eyes lost focus as she shook her head. "No, with his personality, I'm afraid he wouldn't. A person's heart is made of flesh, and blood is thicker than water. Even if he doesn't yet, he'll be standing on our side sooner or later. What kind of son would disobey his mother?" Duan Laoban gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Liu Jishu said nothing. The aged pure tea was sweet and rich on the tongue. Duan Laoban took another sip. Liu Jishu said, "Executive Duan, when it comes to this matter, I can't guarantee you anything. If he really does have blood toxin, he's never mentioned it to us before." Executive Duan laughed out loud. "Executive Liu, could that just be because you're too biased? Even I know that you and your Lao He don't spend much time with your elder son at all. Of course, he's going to be distant from you two. But after what happened with the broadcasting tower, I think he might not be such an indifferent person after all. That Dr. Xie fellow you hired for him merely accompanied him for a brief period and showed him a bit of respect. Yet that was enough for him to go to such lengths for him." At the mention of this, Liu Jishu became unexpectedly indignant. If that bullet had hit him somewhere vital, then... "Don't you have He Li, too? Surely He Li is more important to you." Amused, Duan Laoban examined Liu Jishu's face. It resembled a milkshake that had been poorly mixed, covered in bright splotches of color. "In the future, you and Lao He should remember to save some parental devotion for your eldest. He Li is a normal kid. I know you like him. But now that He Yu has blood toxin, it would be ideal if he listened to us unconditionally. It would save us a lot of trouble if we didn't have to force him." Duan Laoban poured himself some more of the red liquid from the teapot and said mildly, "You can take your time with this, Executive Liu. Rome wasn't built in a day. Give him some more attention, bit by bit, and in time he'll forgive the way you neglected him before. There's no rush." God, this is so sinister. They've got him, like, He Yu is, like, perfectly vulnerable in this moment because he's been crushed by what Xie Qingcheng said, so he doesn't really... He's like, I'm alone now. I don't really have Xie Qingcheng anymore on my side. So he's in, like, a perfect position for them to try to like, twist things and bring him over to their side and do whatever the heck their organization is trying to do, which I don't know. But I don't like it. This time, he poured some tea for Liu Jishu as well and gestured to the teacup. "This pure tea Xiao Shen brought back from Yunnan is really quite good. Executive Liu should try it." Seeing that Liu Jishu was frozen in place, the look in Executive Duan's eyes sharpened slightly. "Oh, you've been very clever all along. That's why you've been able to deceive your Lao He for so many years. Your acting skills are no worse than those of the little idols Executive Huang keeps around. But when it comes to acting, it's possible to get too emotionally invested or flub your lines. Executive Liu, do you understand what I mean?" Liu Jishu swayed unsteadily where she stood, as though his words had stabbed her in the foot. Executive Duan smiled. "We've been collaborators for a long time now. I understand you even better than your Lao He. When it comes to those matters from your past, Executive Liu, as long as you're cooperative enough, I'll always help you keep He Jiwei in the dark. No need to worry. Take a seat." He pushed the teacup closer to Liu Jishu. "Try it. Don't you love tea?" At last, Liu Jishu sat down slowly on the couch across from him. She tentatively touched the rim of the cup with her fingers, which had gone cold with fright. Only after she adjusted to the warmth did she lift the cup and take a sip. She swallowed the tea, the tannins bitter on her tongue. Liu Jishu forced a smile. It's very good. Executive Duan looked at the uncertain expression on her face and said mildly, Executive Liu, just give it your best effort. It takes a very long time to win somebody over, but there's no need to feel too much pressure. Your esteemed son is only 19. The disease differentiation of psychological Ebola becomes more pronounced with time, so let him slowly train his abilities by himself for now. Don't lay your cards out on the table until later. I trust that by that time, he'll willingly become one of our members. Then, what are your plans for training him exactly? Let's wait and see, Executive Duan said in a relaxed voice, like he was playing an extremely interesting game. We'll take it step by step. He was an unexpected surprise to begin with, so I'm thinking that we might not need to plan too far in advance with him yet. Besides, he must have been deeply hurt by that Dr. Xie of his recently. When young people receive a shock, they should be allowed to adjust it to themselves. We'll let him be for now. With that, he leaned forward to brew more tea. We have a lot to do, too. The murder videos this time should have intimidated the rats that needed intimidating. We need to keep a close eye on Chung Kong and Huzhou University and wrap things up cleanly. We've tossed a bone to the dogs, so we have to watch them gnaw on it until they're done. Since we've already led them to that scapegoat overseas, we need to ensure that they don't come sniffing around here. After he finished speaking, Executive Duan poured some more tea for himself with an air of self-satisfaction. Be nicer to He Yu, but remember that it needs to seem natural. If He Jiwei finds out that something is amiss, the one who will suffer losses will always be you. Liu Jishu looked at the image of her flabby, formless face reflected in the cup of tea. After a long while, she murmured, All right, I understand. That's the end of the chapter. Henry, do you think He Yu has listened to Hamilton? Those are the important questions. Does Hamilton exist in this world? Right. But she has to be nice to him, but not too nice. Oh. Oh, this is awful. Well, and... Oh, you know what? Something just occurred to me. I'm so silly. I'm so silly. Earlier, I was looking at the chapter title for He Didn't Care Whether He Lived or Died, and I was like, oh, that's like He Yu's current situation, which I still think it is, because of how horrible he probably feels being, like, betrayed by Xie Qingcheng. But, like, all the chapter titles are in He Yu's perspective, so obviously that one was all about Xie Qingcheng. Anyway, because I just looked at the title for chapter 46 on page 229, which is He Had Been Deceiving Me All Along. And I was like, oh yeah, duh. These are in He Yu's perspective. I'm just like, is the rest of this book going to be angst? Oh, great. Okay. The first sentence of the chapter. He Yu had indeed gone insane. Cool. Awesome. Many days had passed since that night of horrors. He had, in fact, been discharged from the hospital some time ago, but he hadn't told anyone, and he didn't return to his house either. Everyone seemed disgusting and fake to him now. He had an apartment in one of the newer districts of downtown Huzhou, one he hadn't visited very often, even after getting the keys. For now, he had chosen to live there by himself. He'd been deeply stricken when he saw those videos of Xie Qingcheng, but after returning to his senses, he refused to accept that Xie Qingcheng was a coward who was afraid of mentally ill patients. At the hospital, once he'd calmed down a little, he wondered if he was the one who'd misunderstood. If the criminal organization had taken Xie Qingcheng's past videos out of context because they had another motive. Well, the good thing is that He Yu is smart, at least about some things. So, I don't know, the one little tiny ray of hope. Xie Qingcheng was not that kind of person. He Yu went home with that thought in mind, clinging to the last of his hope. He wanted to verify the facts for himself and didn't want anyone to disturb him. But what he didn't expect was for the things he dug up to be far crueler. The video he had seen was just the tip of the iceberg. Oh, great. The truth was too terrifying. The more he investigated, the sicker he became. The medicine intended to control his symptoms lay on the table, untouched after he had taken a few pills, because it had absolutely no effect. The results of his personal investigation destroyed his sense of self even further. Some pills were no longer enough to control his downward spiral. It felt as if lichen had grown over his heart, as if all his senses had gone numb. He wanted to kill. He wanted to drink blood. Morality and legality suddenly felt utterly irrelevant. During a flare-up of psychological Ebola, his very life seemed unimportant. He wasn't afraid of death, so why would he fear society's rules? He Yu sat in a black armchair. His phone had rung countless times, all calls and texts from Xie Qingcheng, but he didn't pick up or read any of them. He just stared at the white wall in front of him. It was about 5 meters high, so wide and tall it seemed like the massive screen in a movie theater. And right now, it was covered with densely packed projections of text messages. This was everything from the past few years that he'd been able to recover from the cloud using illicit technology. Xie Qingcheng's private messages. Messages about He Yu. No. Oh, this is bad. He Yu was an elite hacker. He'd always been extremely talented in this field, but having the capability didn't mean he would actually do certain things. Just as there were many people in the world capable of committing murder, but few actually became killers. There was a clear boundary in He Yu's heart, one he'd never crossed in the past. But it was only when he opened those dusty doors and stepped inside that he saw the kind of spectacle that lay within. What he saw made his blood run cold. Even though too much time had passed and the recovered messages were incomplete, what he'd gathered was more than enough to shake him to his core. Beginning with the earliest recovered content, he saw his father offering a high salary to Xie Qingcheng to treat He Yu. Xie Qingcheng had been rather reluctant at the beginning, saying that although case number 3 had already died, they had extremely violent tendencies before their death. Even though he was sympathetic to He Yu's plight, he seriously had no wish to waste his time on a long-term engagement with a psychological Ebola patient. And here's a text exchange. Xie Qingcheng. Treating a patient like this won't go anywhere, nor is it very meaningful. I want to use this time on more worthwhile tasks. He Jiwei. He Yu is different. He's still too young. He definitely won't go the same way case number 3 did. I know you don't find psychological Ebola uninteresting, Dr. Xie. On account of our past friendship, please at least come over for a chat and meet my son. Xie Qingcheng. Executive He, I have more important things to do, and I can't endorse the companionship treatment method that other doctors have suggested to you. Maintaining a long-term relationship with the doctor will result in the patient becoming reliant on them. When the time comes, forcibly ending the treatment will be like quitting a drug and will be more likely to trigger negative emotional backlash instead. He Jiwei. But I have no other choice. Trying this is my last option. Dr. Xie, could you please at least meet with him for once, for my sake? Getting Xie Qingcheng to come had been so difficult, requiring countless pleas and appeals. And as for the day he left? The day he resigned, He Jiwei had sent him a message. He Jiwei. Dr. Xie, you've still decided to quit. Xie Qingcheng. Yes, He Jiwei. If nothing else, there's still human connection aside from the contract. You've always been very good to He Yu. Sometimes you'd even argue with me on his behalf. Xie Qingcheng. I would do the same for anyone, because it is part of what I was paid to do. He Jiwei. But He Yu has already developed a reliance upon you. You must know this. Xie Qingcheng. I told Executive He at the very beginning that a long-term companionship style of treatment would have this kind of effect on the patient. To be honest, this was all within our expectations. He Jiwei. To him, you're different, Dr. Xie. Xie Qingcheng. But to me, he's the same as any other patient. There's no difference whatsoever. The conversation didn't end there. He Jiwei. Xie Qingcheng, if you're so dead set on leaving, I can't stop you. But we originally agreed on 10 years for the contract. Since it's ending early, there are some remunerations I promised you that I won't be able to honor entirely. Xie Qingcheng. That's fine. That's fine. I don't mind. Once it got to that point, He Jiwei had more or less realized that anything he said to Xie Qingcheng would be useless. After a long moment of silence, he switched his tone. He Jiwei. Then think about how you're going to tell him. You're leaving so suddenly. At the very least, you have to come up with some way for him to accept it as quickly as possible. In contrast, Xie Qingcheng's response was surprisingly direct. Xie Qingcheng. If Executive He has no objections, I plan to tell him that the contract was originally set for 7 years. This will make him feel better, but I will also need your cooperation. He Jiwei. Xie Qingcheng, is this matter really non-negotiable? Did the Qin Suyan matter shake you up so badly that you need to do things so finally? Xie Qingcheng. Executive He. This isn't a matter of finality. This is just a job. Xie Qingcheng. I couldn't possibly feel anything more, and I never have. I must resign. He Jiwei. You can't wait till the end of the contract? Xie Qingcheng. I can't. He Jiwei. Xie Qingcheng, your heart is truly colder than I had imagined. Xie Qingcheng. For him, this is the kindest lie. The city lights twinkled from beyond the window, and the massive billboards flashed at irregular intervals, spilling into He Yu's living room like crystalline ripples, scouring away the countless messages projected onto the wall, as if washing away the makeup that Xie Qingcheng had put on. It felt as though He Yu had finally seen Xie Qingcheng's true face today. The patience, equality, and acceptance with which he had treated him were all fake. It was a mechanical repetition, a performance of civility, all empty theory, carried out to appease and deceive him. Now, I get why He Yu feels the way he does, but I do want to point out how similar that is to, like, how He Yu treats people. He's always got the mask on and kind of doing the fake civility thing. So it's so interesting because they're at this huge impasse, but like they're so similar to each other in a way, you know? Even the contract period he cited at their parting wasn't true. Back then, He Yu had even believed it. Believed that Xie Qingcheng was determined to leave because his time was up. As it turned out, this was the actual truth. 10 years. Xie Qingcheng should have accompanied him up until he graduated senior high. But after the Qin Xian incident, Xie Qingcheng didn't hesitate. He would happily forego extra wages if it meant he could leave He Yu. How terrified had he been? He conspired with He Jiwei to lie to He Yu, but he could still speak of great principles with such calm conviction, telling him that this was how normal relationships came to an end. All of the rationality belonged to Xie Qingcheng, while He Yu seemed like an immature, unreasonable clown. So stupid. It was all a lie. A lie. Those words that Xie Qingcheng had once said to encourage him, the ones that had maintained his sense of self as he struggled through the agony of a flare-up, were indeed no more than the empty platitudes a psychiatrist told their patient. Just like a surgeon would tell a late-stage cancer patient, you still have hope if you hold on. But the doctor already knew that there was no hope. Like police would persuade a youth on the verge of suicide by saying, "You're not ugly. Why would you think that way? Everyone is special. There will always be someone who likes you. Come down. Give me your hand." But, okay. This is how I use perspective, but I kind of hate this. But I get it. It's like you thinking about these situations. But could the police really not see the young man's hideous face and flabby body? Those were just the emptiest of consolations. Xie Qingcheng's views on treatment and the principles that guided He Yu to integrate into society had once given He Yu 10 years' worth of support. Even though Xie Qingcheng chose to leave in the end, He Yu hadn't felt any hatred toward him. He strove to understand the principles of which Xie Qingcheng spoke. He tried to understand the end of a relationship between two normal people that Xie Qingcheng described. In the end, he'd made peace with Xie Qingcheng's choice and with himself. But he hadn't expected that none of Xie Qingcheng's words were sincere, that they were just a doctor's method of treatment, some pretty words. Even the contract period Xie Qingcheng had told him about was an invention. He Yu found himself thinking of the time he and Xie Qingcheng bumped into a gay couple at the dining hall. At the time, both of them had been very uncomfortable, and rose in unison to change seats. He'd felt a little surprised and asked Xie Qingcheng, "Aren't you a doctor? How come you can't bear to see them either?" Xie Qingcheng had told him back then that a doctor's medical philosophies were entirely separate from their personal opinions. As a doctor, he did believe that homosexuals didn't have any mental problems. But as Xie Qingcheng, the individual, he personally couldn't accept that kind of relationship at all. The noble homophobe. I'm sorry, that's so funny to think about. But also, I do hope that real doctors in real life do, apply this philosophy to things for real, because they should. Because you know that you've, gone to a doctor and they've been, prejudiced about something, but they, have to do it as their job, and you just hope that they're not gonna, I don't know, not take things seriously because of it. Now He Yu understood very clearly. As a doctor, Xie Qingcheng was willing to guide him towards society, to treat him like a normal person. But as Xie Qingcheng, he hadn't developed any sort of connection with He Yu. Not only did Xie Qingcheng leave He Yu out of his own volition, He Yu couldn't help but recall that Xie Qingcheng had once had Xie Shui keep her distance from him as well. Xie Qingcheng had been frightened. He'd run. He'd rather not earn money if it meant that he and his family could get further away from He Yu. He Yu leaned back into the armchair, staring at it all with his chin in his hand. Slowly, he began to smile. His lips were razor thin. From the side, their upward curve seemed somewhat sinister. "Are all you doctors really so insincere?" he murmured softly to that lonely white wall. The wound on his shoulder was still covered in bandages. Blood seeped out, followed by a dull throb of pain that spread from the wound like snake venom to his fingertips and heart. "What a great disguise you wear, Xie Qingcheng." At that moment, He Yu suddenly felt that everything he'd done in the past was ridiculous, like a joke. What was the point of controlling one's inner heart? What shackles of illness could be thrown off? In the past few years, what exactly had he been striving for, insisting on, and believing in? He slowly closed his eyes. Along with the throbbing of the gunshot wound in his shoulder, the scars on his wrists also seemed to sting faintly. He wondered how Xie Qingcheng had managed to go so far with his falsehoods, covering his eyes with both hands, and having him follow along so ignorantly and stupidly for so long. Xie Qingcheng said to him that being sick was nothing to fear. Xie Qingcheng told him that he could say it hurts when he was in pain, that he could ask for sweets, that no one would laugh at him. With every word, Xie Qingcheng had knocked down the sturdy fortress around his heart. He Yu had once thought that what Xie Qingcheng had extended to him was a pair of warm, outstretched hands. But in the end, it was no more than an ice-cold knife. He Yu protected himself very well, but Xie Qingcheng's knife had stabbed hard into the depths of his heart. It was too tragic. He Yu had lived 19 years wearing a flawless mask. He never said anything genuine to others, nor did he receive much sincerity in others' words. In those 19 years of pain and sickness, Xie Qingcheng was actually the only one to ever ask him, "Doesn't that hurt? Doesn't that hurt?" He Yu slowly stood up from the armchair, lifting a hand and pressing it over his heart. He looked at the earth-shatteringly cold messages in front of him, as if he were standing in the bone-piercing gale of a winter blizzard. He lowered his head, bent down, and slowly began to laugh. It was so funny. It seemed as though he truly, actually, genuinely experienced how terrifying pain could be. Was this what it meant to hurt? This deception, all of his futile struggles, all of his idiocy and loneliness. If this was what it was like, he'd rather have gone on living numbly forever. What was wrong with being a stalk of grass? Why did his heart have to be ravaged by lies? He read onward, page after page, file after file, message after message, poring over everything line by line, every word like a knife to his heart. He'd always thought his heart was thickly calloused, but in this moment, it hurt so much, it felt as if his own flesh didn't even belong to him anymore. Didn't belong to him. He Yu reached up to touch his forehead. His fingertips were ice cold, and all his limbs felt numb. He'd learned enough. He suddenly rose, violently sweeping everything off of the tea table in front of him. Shattered fragments crashed across the floor. Panting, he went to find the projector remote, picked it up, and tried to close this Pandora's box. But at that very moment, amidst this exploding star of messages, he saw a text belonging to Xie Xue. It had been sent 6 years ago, on his birthday. Xie Xue. Guga, Auntie Lee's sick. I've gone with her to get an IV. When will you be back from your work trip? These hospital procedures are so confusing. My head hurts. I wish you were here. When He Yu first saw this message, all he felt was a gentle tug in his mind, like a moth that had yet to realize it had landed in a spider's web. But after a few seconds ticked by, he suddenly looked up, staring at that message in disbelief. The moth in the spider's web began to struggle, flapping furiously, iridescent dust falling from its wings, its fluttering movements stirring an earthquake in his memories. 6 years ago, on his birthday, that day, hadn't Xie Xue been with him? Are his memories, like, well, I don't know, I don't want to say fucked with, because I don't know if anyone would have been able to fuck with his memories, but are his memories, like, wrong? Like, are there situations where he's like, oh, I remember being with Xie Xue and doing this thing, and it turns out it was Xie Qingcheng? That's certainly what it sounds like. Oh, okay. I have 2 more chapters left, and I think it's time to take a break now. Because we are on page 239 for chapter 47, which is called It Hurt Too Much. Man, has Meat Bun titled, like, an Arha chapter like that? Like, It Hurt Too Much, or It Hurt, or something? I feel like, I don't know, it's definitely a phrase that she uses a lot, and somehow manages to make it extremely effective, because it's like, I see Meat Bun saying that, and I'm like, yeah, it really does hurt. I am hurting right now. Um, just the most meat bun chapter title of all. So, yeah, I'm going to take a break. When we come back, we will be on chapter 47. Super excited for that. Hello, I am back. Just as we were looking at some heartbreaking quotes from previously in the volume. Yeah, those. Ow, indeed. So we're on page 239 for chapter 47, which is called It Hurt Too Much. 6 years ago, in the cold and quiet Ho residence, there was no laughter and no companionship. Although the household staff had prepared a cake for him on He Jiwei and Liu Jishu's orders, He Yu didn't eat it. It was his birthday, yet his parents weren't present and were instead in Yanzhou with his little brother. They said they had to meet with an important client that day and would have to wait until after the discussions ended to see whether they could fly back in time. He Yu didn't have many friends either, since he was mostly cordial and distant with his classmates. It would have been awkward to invite any of them to his birthday party. That day, Xie Qingcheng wasn't in Huzhou either. He was on a work trip, as Xie Shui's message had stated, attending a conference. Not even the heavens were cooperating that day. The rain poured down as the wind blew wildly. He Yu stood in the living room watching the floor-to-ceiling European-style windows become an eerily fluctuating ink painting, framing the torrential deluge outside. A bell tolled once, twice, 3 times. The large clock in the residence sounded every hour, accurately announcing the time on its clock face. From afternoon to evening to nightfall. Young master, don't wait any longer. Executive He and Executive Liu said they won't be able to get back today. Unable to bear it any longer, the housekeeper cautiously stepped forward and draped a jacket over He Yu's shoulders. You should go to bed. It's okay. It's not like today is a formal holiday or anything. When He Yu turned his head, he was unexpectedly still smiling. Go do what you have to do. I'm going to watch the rain for a while longer, but I'll rest soon. The housekeeper sighed softly and left. Was it really okay? Did it really not matter? Of course not. He was just waiting. He thought that there must at least be one person in the world who would remember him, who would miss him, who would brave the wind and rain to keep him company in the dark. He wasn't such a bad person that he deserved to be punished with loneliness like this, right? He waited and waited. Who you? Who you? After an indeterminate length of time, it seemed like it was right before the clock bell struck midnight, he heard someone knocking on the door, and a girl's faint voice that sounded so distinctly through the wind and rain. A girl's faint voice that sounded so indistinctly through the wind and rain that it seemed like an illusion. Yu's eyes widened slightly, and he hastily rushed over to open the door. Standing outside, panting slightly, was Xie Shui, the only girl he was close to, the only playmate who had stayed with him for so many years. She was wearing a raincoat, and her rain-drenched face looked ice-cold. But when she looked up at him, her gaze was warm. Sniffling slightly, she took off her raincoat with a smile, revealing the birthday cake that she had carefully hidden underneath. I made it in time, right? Why did you come? I didn't want you to spend your birthday alone. How sad would that be? Xie Shui wiped away the water that was dripping from her hair and said, I made your favorite chocolate cake for you. Gosh, I nearly drowned out there. It's such a big storm. What the hell? In that moment, He Yu's resentment seemed to dissipate as the void in his heart was filled. He grabbed Xie Shui's freezing hand and pulled her inside. He felt like his voice was a little raspy as he said, I also didn't think I should be alone. How is that possible? How could you be alone? You still have me. I'll always stay with you. He Yu said nothing. Happy 13th birthday, He Yu. The girl smiled brightly, becoming the most brilliant ray of sunshine in the shadowy home. It was so long ago, He Yu couldn't quite remember what had happened afterward. He only remembered that when he went to the refrigerator, looking for a piece of that unfinished chocolate cake, it was already gone. Of course, the untouched desserts that the nanny baked for him had disappeared along with that piece of cake. Seeing his dejected face, the nanny quickly explained before he could get mad. Those things aren't fresh anymore. It's not good for you to eat them, so they were tossed. If you want, we can make them again tonight. But even if they were to make it again, it still wouldn't be the cake that Xie Shui had brought for him on that rainy night. He Yu had said, It's fine, forget it. Now, He Yu looked at the projection before him, his spirits plummeting into a pool of ice. He clearly remembered Xie Shui coming to his house on that day. That day he'd had someone with him. Someone had remembered him. But the contents in the projected images in front of him couldn't possibly be fake. He had gathered the information himself from backups on cloud storage. Xie Shui. Guga, Auntie Lee's sick. I've gone with her to get an IV. When will you be back from your work trip? These hospital procedures are so confusing. My head hurts. I wish you were here. How could it be? How could this be? He pulled out his computer and his fingers flew over the keyboard, his expression twisted and his eyes nearly insane, as if he was about to dig up a grave of information, pry open the coffin, and exhume the corpse, seeking a truth that had been buried for ages. He rapidly retrieved the messages from those dates. Xie Shui's, Xie Qingcheng's, He Jiwei's, Liu Jishu's. The truth was like an incorruptible corpse, and from within the cloud's database, it gave him a coldly eerie sneer. Lies, lies, lies. Because too much time had passed, most of the chat logs could no longer be retrieved, but the messages that he successfully restored were enough to prove that, on that night, on the night when he had needed Xie Shui the most, she hadn't come at all. He Yu even saw the message she had sent to Xie Qingcheng the next day. Xie Shui. He Yu asked me if I could go to his house to play and spend his birthday with him. But Auntie Lee was so sick yesterday, and I was so busy that I forgot to respond to him. I feel so embarrassed. Can you apologize to him for me? I don't have the guts to explain it to him. Xie Qingcheng, there's no need for you to get so close to him. Oh, you kept searching. The timeline inched forward and became even more shocking. He found a certain chat log. It was a conversation between Xie Qingcheng and He Jiwei. Oh man. Okay, we're confirming things now. He Jiwei. He Yu seems to create a sort of delusion when he's at his most helpless, and the object of his delusion is your little sister. I've recently discovered by accident that some of the things he told me didn't happen at all. Dr. Xie, this kind of situation... Xie Qingcheng. It's very normal for him. I've known about this behavior of his since the beginning. He Jiwei. How could this be? Xie Qingcheng. He Yu needs a friend who's around his age, but isn't willing to open his heart to any of his peers. His way of thinking is unique and precocious, so most children his age don't quite understand him. Because of his long-term isolation, he needs an outlet to vent his emotions, and at such a time, his closest peer can very easily become his own reflection. He Jiwei. His own reflection. Xie Qingcheng. Yes, some children with autism or other psychological conditions will imagine a friend as they're growing up. And with that friend, they can hand over their heart without reservation. That friend may not exist at all, or they might only exist in part. The patients make them up to fulfill the intense longing in their own hearts. Xie Qingcheng sent another explanatory message to He Jiwei. Actually, it's not just children with mental illnesses. Normal children will also develop some delusions when they're lonely. For example, if they're an outcast in class and have no friends, they'll make up a friend for themselves and believe that they're the only person who can see and communicate with that friend. This is a child's instinctual psychological defense mechanism. It's just another text by Xie Qingcheng. But people who aren't mentally ill are able to distinguish imagination from reality and realize that these are illusions. They know that they're born from the comfort they so desire. But for a child like He Yu, it's hard for him to recognize this, especially because his delusion is only partially imagined. He Jiwei. By only partially imagined, you mean Xie Qingcheng. Xie Shui does exist. She's my sister, and she's his closest friend, who is indeed very nice to him. But I know my sister very well. She's always very enthusiastic around people. And although He Yu is a good friend of hers, they aren't particularly close yet. There are certain things that she wouldn't do for him. However, with respect to He Yu, his mind needs to be supported. The things that he hoped Xie Shui would do, but she didn't, were filled in by his imagination. He only has one friend, and he doesn't want to be disappointed by his only friend. And so, his subconscious mind will try to convince him repeatedly that such things really did happen in the past, that Xie Shui really did do all of those things. He Jiwei. But this is so mystifying that it's hard for me to believe. Xie Qingcheng. It's not mystifying at all. The human brain is a very complex, precise instrument. Such a phenomenon can occur if there's an error in a person's memory, and the error is continuously reiterated. Xie Qingcheng, again. It's just like how some people confuse dreams with reality, or the so-called Mandela effect. He Jiwei. The Mandela effect? Xie Qingcheng. It's not a strictly academic concept, but it's useful as an explanation. Executive He, you can understand it as when entire communities of people share discrepancies in their memories. If you search the internet, you can find many examples of it. For example, does Mickey Mouse wear overalls? This time, it took He Jiwei some time to respond, as if he had been shocked stupid by Xie Qingcheng asking such a cute question during such a serious conversation. I can do it. He Jiwei. I think so. Xie Qingcheng. He doesn't. But so many people believe that he's always worn overalls. This is the Mandela effect. It's an erroneous memory that has been repeatedly affirmed by the human brain, resulting in this kind of impression. Executive He, you can think of Mickey Mouse as being equivalent to my sister. She exists, but she's actually never worn overalls. However, Hoyu used his own imagination to fill in the two non-existent overall straps, resolutely believing this to be the truest reality of the matter. Henry, I also thought he wore overalls. So I don't know, I'm gonna have to figure that one out later, but I guess the Mandela effect got us. He. Then, is this considered a delusional disorder? Xie Chung. It can't be called that. To Hoyu, this is a way for him to protect, comfort, and redeem himself. A long time passed between this message and his next. Xie Chung. Executive He, with all due respect, you and Executive Liu don't spend enough time with him. Even children with healthy mindsets can hardly endure such neglect, never mind the fact that he's mentally ill. Ooh, he said it. He said it to them. He can't get any care and love, but he's stubborn about showing vulnerability. Perhaps stubborn isn't the right word, but he knows that it's useless to cry or beg because nothing will give him the reaction that he wants, so he's already used to internalizing everything and defending himself. The Xie he imagined was actually his own reflection the entire time. It was his own heart that comforted him, borrowing Xie image to tell him what he wanted to hear. Reading these old messages, Yu thought about the wishes that were buried deep within his heart. For example, I'll always stay with you. For example, the words that he never got to hear face to face. Happy birthday. Didn't he long for someone to gift those words to him? But he never got to hear them. And again, it's back to the chat logs. Xie Chung. Since nobody told him, and since he's someone with a strong sense of self-respect, he would never say such things to himself. Therefore, his brain relied partially on his imagination to fulfill his wish, while maintaining his dignity at the same time. This is a kind of psychological self-defense mechanism that people have, so there's no need for you to worry too much. He, you've known about this all along? Xie Chung. I've observed it for a while now. I can't tell him about this, since the shock would be too much. But I always tell Xie to stay a bit further away from him. Xie shouldn't be the person on whom he develops an emotional dependence. Neither of us should be, Executive He. Sooner or later, we'll have to leave. Okay, that's starting to make more sense, because something is starting to click with me where it's like he wasn't just telling Xie stay away from him because he's like dangerous or something. He's saying, hey, he's developing this thing, this sort of reliance on you, and he couldn't tell Xie all of that. But like knowing that he wasn't always going to be his doctor, he was, I guess, rightfully trying to express that boundary. Xie Chung. I'm a doctor, not Hoyu's relative. I can't possibly waste an entire lifetime on a single medical case, and Xie even less. I can only give him guidance, not the type of love he lacks and wants to have. My sister is the same. Yu didn't continue reading the following messages. They were no longer important. Knowing this was already enough. More than enough. Xie Chung had been deceiving him all along, and Xie wasn't real either. Of the two of them, one was the person who'd once given him the strongest encouragement with his articles of faith, allowing him to believe that there would come a day when he could return to regular society, while the other was the person who had given him the warmest companionship, who would always rush to his side in the nick of time when he was at his most hopelessly desperate. Just like how on the night of that torrential downpour, she'd knocked on his door while shouting his name, taken off her raincoat, and presented him with the chocolate cake that he wanted. He never could have imagined that perhaps that the cake and that Xie never existed at all. Meanwhile, Xie Qingcheng had witnessed his pitiful, lowly self-comfort. The man had seen it all and knew it very well. No one had ever loved him. It was his own idiocy. He was too foolish, too stupid, too desperate in his yearning to walk amongst the warmth of the crowd. In order to become a normal person, in order to tuck his hideously ghoulish face away, he'd forged a faintly glimmering glow from within his own bloody skull. Xie Qingcheng had seen it, but he had said, I can't possibly waste an entire lifetime on a single medical case. And Xie even less. I can only give him guidance, and not the type of love he lacks and wants to have. My sister is the same. But if someone possessed love in the first place, why would he lie, even to himself? What kind of liar would trick the entire world, yet end up deceiving himself the most? Only the poorest, most destitute of liars. The things he had were too few, and the tears he shed were too many. Even happy birthday was something he could only obtain through his own imagination. If he didn't lie to himself, what could he rely upon to continue living with a smile? So, even in front of himself, he would wear a smiling mask tightly bolted to his face, which he was loath to take off. He would lie even to himself. Xie Qingcheng was right. He did have self-respect. He didn't want to be seen as a patient, a madman. He knew that given the He family's status, many people were waiting to see him come crashing down, to watch him make a fool of himself, to look at his corpse and rejoice in his blood. Thus, he strove even harder to prove himself. He didn't want to receive anyone's pity by showing them his scars. Henry, I like how this paves the way for He Yu to develop an obsession with only Xie Qingcheng, without lying to himself about the object of his fixation, at least. Like, he could develop an obsession with him, but at this point he already knows the truth about what Xie Qingcheng, said. So it's not as... It wouldn't be rooted in something fake. I think that's what you're saying. Xie Qingcheng cared and wanted to help him, but of course He Yu would not recognize that in the state. Yes, he's gleaning certain things from this information, but there's certain things he's missing. He's kind of... And it totally makes sense why. He's missing the fact that Xie Qingcheng was, talking to his parents, hey, you need to love him more. Xie Qingcheng was sticking up for him. Oh, I see. It paves the way for the relationship. He doesn't realize he's gay, but at least he knows he's not obsessed with Xie. Okay. Yeah. He Yu stood in the empty living room for a very long time. He stood there so long that time seemed to become slightly hazy. His gaze was light yet sharp, repeatedly sweeping over the ice-cold tide of messages before him. In the end, that sharp look seemed to have been eroded by the tide, becoming scattered and unfocused. He slowly closed his eyes. His mask had grown into his flesh, but Xie Qingcheng had cruelly torn it away. He reached up and touched his own face silently. It hurt. It hurt so much. It hurt so badly it made his heart and entire body shudder. It felt as though he'd lost everything overnight. Xie Qingcheng's articles of faith were fake. Xie Xue's closeness was fake. The consolation he had given himself was fake. And in the end, even his self-respect, even the hard shell he used to protect himself, that mask, had been smashed to pieces. Only now did he suddenly realize that, as it turned out, his laughable, clownish face had already been exposed to Xie Qingcheng for many years. So what exactly was he persevering for? And why did he have to be so stupid? Risking his life to accompany that person for just a word of acknowledgement in return, or to repay the wisp of hope that Xie Qingcheng had once given him. He disregarded his own life to gain favor with a liar for an all-encompassing lie. He Yu started to laugh softly. He doubled over and leaned against the wall, laughter growing louder and louder, madder and madder, like a vengeful ghost stirring in its grave. The wraiths of sickness in his heart glided out in their hooded cloaks. He put his hand to his forehead as his laughter turned deranged. It seemed furious and hateful, sorrowful, yet crazed, as tears fell incessantly down his cheeks. It really hurt too much. He saw Xie Qingcheng reach out to him with an open hand, but what lay in his palm was an ice-cold scalpel. This was the actual truth. He saw Xie Shui pass him a piece of chocolate with a smile, but he blinked his eyes, and she was only gazing at him from afar. This was the actual truth. And then he saw himself standing before the floor-to-ceiling window. A storm was raging outside. The antique grandfather clock in the old residence rang 12 times. It was midnight, and he was surrounded by endless darkness. But no one knocked on the door. No one had ever knocked on the door. He waited from darkness until dawn. The storm had ceased, and the long night had brightened, but he never managed to get a single sincere wish of happy birthday. This was the actual truth. Then he saw himself strapped to a bed, gagged, as needles pierced his skin. He struggled and wailed like a dying beast, but he couldn't call out anyone's name. He was a solitary island. There were no bridges. This was the actual fucking truth. The truth. A child who was denied love. In order to resist the demons in the depths of his mind, to keep striving to live on, he lied to anyone and everyone, even himself, for so many years. He Yu leaned against the wall. He'd already vengefully ripped away the bandages from his shoulder, allowing his wound to tear open. His blood was everywhere. Only the scent of it could please him and ground him and make him feel that he was actually alive. He had a body. The blood he shed was warm. He was a living, breathing person. He was alive. He was alive. He buried his hands in his hair, knuckles whitening, veins protruding. He was like a blinded dragon with its claws torn out. Having lost the treasures he cherished, and the lair he relied on for refuge, he'd been forced out into the sunlight, beneath the clear sky, with each one of his ugly scabs on display, for everyone to see and ridicule as they pleased. He'd finally woken up from his dream. He'd been struggling for almost 20 years, but he was still insane. No one had ever loved him. No one had ever cared for him. He had nothing but a clumsy lie. He'd never actually managed to earn anything. Great. That's the end of the chapter. Oh no, he's becoming the Joker, Henry. Oh. Yeah, wow, that was a lot. Well, we're on... Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna say this too, because I understand why a lot of people cannot get into this book. And I think there's some people that start reading Volume 1 and they give up somewhere in Volume 1. But I was just thinking about how much I've seen that people are just like, oh, both of the main characters are unlikable in this series. And, like, there's so many horrible things about He Yu, but it's really hard for me to, like, see him as an unlikable character. Like, I'm just like, no, but he's so sympathetic at the same time. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, and the more the story develops, the more I feel that way. So, we're on the last chapter for today. Page 253. Chapter 48. Madness. See, there's something especially ominous about a meat bun chapter title that's just one word. You know, it's like, okay, we're in deep right now. It hurt too much. The lie about the contract, the truth about Xie Shui. The deception Xie Qingcheng had created. The way he fled without so much as a backward glance. It was as if He Yu had lived the past 19 years in a dream. He thought that he had disguised himself very well and tricked everyone, but in reality, he was the wretched lunatic who had been deceived. He Yu clutched his head and howled grievously, like a trapped, blood-soaked beast that had fallen into a snare. The voice that came out of his throat was so hoarse and wrecked that it didn't even sound human. In his eyes, vacant confusion was mixed with frantic madness. He sat in his corner, curled up, hugging himself as though he was afraid of the cold. What articles of faith? All lies. What warmth? An illusion. He was a madman. A delusional invalid. An ugly, laughable, absurd, comical idiot who had exposed his scars to everyone without even realizing it. He seemed extremely pitiful, like a fetus that was about to die within its mother's body, isolated from the outside world, his umbilical cord cut, unable to breathe, sinking into an endlessly oppressive suffocation. He could only cry out from underwater, but no one ashore could hear him. He could only hold tightly onto himself. The only warmth he could feel came from him alone. It had all been his own sad attempts to comfort himself. He Yu clawed at his hair, then froze in place for a stretch of time. His eyes grew redder and redder as his sense of self grew dimmer and dimmer. Finally, he stopped wailing and sat up calmly, his body unfurling as he tilted his head back to look at the ceiling. Then, he stood up. His eyes were drawn to the display cabinet. Reflected inside was his unbearably wretched silhouette, so frighteningly unfamiliar. The suppressed darkness and violence in his bones abruptly burst out as he grabbed a metal ornament from the side and smashed it into the cabinet with a loud bang. It was as if he had gone insane. The evil dragon had been unleashed from its shackles. The devil inside him emerged from the cave and soared into the sky, summoning a vengeful rainstorm as it roared and bellowed. He Yu was completely swallowed by madness, howling as he smashed practically everything in the house, ripping open his wound even further in the process. The sickly stench of blood filled the air, but he didn't care at all. He tore down the curtains and smashed the television, laying waste to every single thing within reach. Surely, some offerings ought to be made to commemorate the death of his inner self. He didn't know how long this crazed venting went on for, but regardless of how good the soundproofing was in his building, his neighbor downstairs couldn't take it any longer and ran up to knock on his door. Henry, sorry, I looked up and I just saw, baby, please just pick up a Black Parade CD. That's what he needs right now. He Yu abruptly opened it. His hand, holding a length of steel pipe that he had wrenched from the window, was still dripping blood. The room behind him was in shambles. He Yu stared at the neighbor with a pair of bloodshot eyes. Can I help you? The neighbor was so terrified he nearly pissed himself as his legs gave out, but He Yu grabbed him by the collar and pulled him upright. A heavy metallic stench flooded the neighbor's nose as He Yu's blood stained his luxurious silk nightgown. He Yu asked menacingly again, Can I help you? No, no, no. The neighbor hadn't expected to be faced with such a bloody and violent spectacle. The pale young man with the handsome face standing inside the apartment had an aura so evil he seemed like one of those crazy, vengeful spirits on TV. The neighbor didn't dare say anything more. With his jowls trembling and thighs quaking, he clasped his hands together in a placating manner. Guh, Daga, do whatever you like, whatever makes you happy, whatever makes you happy. He Yu shoved him away and closed the door with a bang. Stumbling, the neighbor practically crawled his way back into the elevator. Even before reaching his own door, he had already begun wailing in a trembling voice, Wifey, wifey, save me. He Yu's rampage had been interrupted by this person's arrival. Panting, he turned his head and looked around. How did this place look at all like a home? It was clearly the site of a chaotic battle. After surveying the room with his bloodshot eyes, Yu concluded that there was indeed nothing left for him to smash. He tossed the steel pipe aside, stepped over the ruins, and walked into the bathroom. He looked at his ashen face in the cracked mirror. His reflection was fractured, just like the many different faces he showed to society. Yu stilled and allowed his breathing to return to a steady pace, as his lips slowly stopped trembling. His grief and madness had passed. Now the only thing he had left was serenity, a terrifying serenity. He had finished violently venting his feelings, and his entire lair was destroyed. What should he do next? He still had to go outside. By now, he had reached a point where he didn't even care whether he was normal or not. He wanted to reveal this abnormal appearance of his, to unfurl his craggy wings and fly out of this dark cave, to roar at those so-called normal people. The young man in the mirror slowly looked up. A hand dripping with blood stroked his cheek, then slowly clawed at it. A faint smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. It seemed gentlemanly and refined, but was, in reality, more unfeeling than it had ever been. Give him a normal people scare me t-shirt, basically. So there's a scene break. Meanwhile, far off in Huzhou Medical's faculty dorm, Xie Qingcheng's eyelid twitched a few times as a vague sense of unease settled over him. I like to think that they just have like a psychic connection somehow. He and Chen Man had finished eating dinner, and once he'd helped clean up the table, Chen Man prepared to head home. Before leaving, Chen Man said, "Go, I'll drop by again tomorrow night. Don't go online for the next few days," he said softly. "It's not worth it." Xie Qingcheng knew he was talking about the internet's reaction to the videos that had been displayed on the broadcasting tower, but Chen Man was overthinking it. Xie Qingcheng wasn't the kind of person who paid much attention to online news in the first place, especially when his real life was already such a mess. But he assented. After seeing Chen Man off, he went downstairs to buy another pack of cigarettes. He called Xie Shui as he smoked. Xie Shui's condition wasn't much better, but she was a bit more comfortable since Auntie Li was staying with her. As the siblings talked, Xie Qingcheng suddenly received another call. He said a few more words to Xie Shui, then hung up. The call was from Zheng Jingfeng. "Hello, Lao Zheng. Xiao Xie, a member of our unit, just saw the kid who was with you at the archives." Xie Qingcheng's chest tightened. "He's been discharged from the hospital?" Zheng Jingfeng grunted in affirmation, but this was obviously not what he wanted to talk about. "Yeah. Oh, right. How old is that kid? 18? 19? I've forgotten." Xie Qingcheng paused for a moment before replying. "Why do you ask?" "Do you think I want to? Weren't you the one who told me to let you know if anything happened?" Xie Qingcheng's knuckles turned white. What happened to him? "It's not really a big deal. I've realized that there really is a gap between the bourgeoisie and us proles. Fuck. At 18 or 19, I was still spending all my time in training. Anyway, my guess is that even though that little friend of yours was discharged from the hospital, he's still in a lousy mood. He drove a fancy car to the Sky Night Club. Oh, look, there are even messages about it in our work group chat. Apparently, he drove the sports car like a rocket, and they only finally managed to pull him over in front of the club. He cooperated, but his attitude was so fucking vile. When he got out of the car, he slammed the door and told them to just tow his car and fuck off to save him the trouble of finding a driver." Xie Qingcheng had no response to that. "And you're familiar with the Sky Night Club, right? It's not a decent place at all. You can't say it's illegal, since it conducts its business properly and doesn't cross the line, but everyone knows how shady things can get at nighttime entertainment establishments." Xie Qingcheng took a deep breath, and He Yu's gentle, thoughtful visage seemed to appear before him once more. Regardless of whether that appearance of his was feigned, It still transformed into the cold, blood-stained face that had turned to look back at him in front of the broadcasting tower. I see. Xie Qingcheng pressed a hand to his forehead as he leaned against the window. Thank you, Lao Zheng. All right, then. You should listen to me more in the future and stop obsessing over your parents' case. You need to let your heart breathe. I can't bear seeing you like this. Okay. After hanging up, Xie Qingcheng put on his jacket and headed over to the Sky Night Club. He thought of a younger He Yu standing in front of the sofa, unwilling to sacrifice his self-respect, but also reluctant to see him leave. The sorrowful, stubborn boy who had forced himself to act as though nothing was wrong as he looked at Xie Qingcheng. Xie Qingcheng, I have a lot of allowance. I can hire you. I don't want to sink into this maelstrom. Please save me. Save me, okay? He never saw the words He Yu couldn't say, the cries for help he couldn't utter. He Yu's own self-respect allowed him to preserve the last shred of dignity he had in front of Xie Qingcheng, but he missed his last chance to ask for help. That year, Xie Qingcheng left He Yu, but when they met again, He Yu didn't seem to resent him all that much. And in Xie Qingcheng's time of greatest need, it was this child who had gone with him to the perilous lair of a beast, and nearly paid for it with his life. When He Yu reached his hand out to Xie Qingcheng, he said that someone had once done the same thing for him. But Xie Qingcheng had done that because of his position, because of his job, because he had been performing his duties as expected of his station. So then, why did this child do it? Xie Qingcheng closed his eyes. Zheng Jingfeng's words echoed in his ears. He said that He Yu had gone to patronize the Sky Night Club, that He Yu had a vile attitude. Xie Qingcheng knew that He Yu had never acted like that in the past. For the sake of acknowledgement, for the sake of others' gazes, for the sake of reintegrating into society, and for the sake of stubbornly resisting his illness, He Yu never yielded to his desires. He never drank from Mephistopheles' poisoned wine. He refused to sink into depravity, refused to admit defeat. He lived by working 10 times, 100 times harder than ordinary people, striving for perfection in everything that he did. He was too afraid of disappointing others. As a patient, he tried to rely on his own efforts so that others wouldn't give up on him, so that they wouldn't equate him with the deceased cases of number 1, number 2, and number 3. He had been doing his utmost to cry for help the entire time. That was why he was so afraid of making mistakes, afraid that he wasn't outstanding enough, afraid that others would be disappointed in him. But in the end, he had still been abandoned. Xie Qingcheng, you might not be mentally ill, but you're even more heartless than me. The words contained a restrained mockery, but that mockery had carried a heartfelt plea. And although Xie Qingcheng had heard those words, he'd failed to hear the boy's hidden imploring as he wept tears of blood. Xie Qingcheng knew. In all of that, he had truly let He Yu down. That child used to trust him so much, even though he'd never been particularly kind to him, always dealing with him in a strictly businesslike manner. It was already an instance of sincere and equal treatment that was difficult to come by for He Yu. He Yu hadn't been wrong when he'd cursed at him. Xie Qingcheng was the heartless one, the one who had gotten everything wrong and failed to do anything right. Oh, you are so right, Henry. I hate to say this to you, Xiega, but the average doctor would not be this involved with their patient. Yeah. Yeah. The club manager of the Sky Night Club was a clever old man. His suit was crisply ironed, his face was overdone, and his personality was as slick as a rat that had scuttled out of a puddle of grease. That is a line. Sometimes Meat Bun writes a line and it's not even, like, about anything that important. It's not even about, like, a main character or, like, it's just like some side character and you're just like, what? Like, how did you do that? Ayo, young Master He, he groveled. A rare guest, a rare guest. He'd overheard everything that had happened just now between He Yu and the traffic officers. Although He Yu didn't come to Skynight very often, he was still considered part of the clientele. In the past, when he needed to network on behalf of his family, he'd brought clients here to relax. He usually only ever stayed for a brief while. He would chat for a spell with the people he brought over in that gentle, refined way of his. Stroking the Sorry, not stroking the atmosphere. That's the wrong word. Sorry. Let me just start all of that over. He would chat for a spell with the people he brought over in that gentle, refined way of his, stoking the atmosphere. Then he would head downstairs and sign the check, telling the manager to put the balance on his card before leaving. But today, things were different. The manager's eyes gleamed as he noted that young Master He had come alone today. The entire city had heard about what had happened in Huzhou University by now. Given He Yu's leading role in that fiasco, the manager thought it completely normal that he would feel unsettled or behave erratically. He supposed that getting shot had made this young man reconsider his life, and that he must have come to the conclusion that his days should be filled with more excitement. Thus, after finally seeing the light, he had come here to search for the true meaning of life, just like the other young masters of his generation. To the manager, He Yu was a walking black Amex. He rushed forward and welcomed him with a smile. Even if young Master He said that he wanted the manager's mom to come sit and talk with him, the manager likely wouldn't have hesitated to make a fucking long-distance phone call and buy her a ticket for the earliest flight in. Young Master He, which floor will it be for you tonight? I'll arrange the best service for you right away. He Yu had only done the bare minimum to patch up the gunshot wound on his arm before heading out. He was still wearing a simple, long-sleeved black turtleneck shirt with a pair of jeans. He'd even put on a baseball cap that gave him a student-like aura. But from beneath the shadow cast by the brim of his cap, one could see that his almond eyes were enshrouded by an uncommon darkness. When He Yu lifted his head, the extravagant, dazzling lights of the Skynight Club shone in his overcast eyes. The top floor, he said. This level consisted of a number of large, private rooms. The wait staff of these rooms were exceedingly secretive, and had been personally trained by the owner, each one cleverer than the next. It was a place that was perfect for discussing all manners of business. Of course, the price was likewise sky-high. The eldest scion of the He family was really something else, the manager thought. He hadn't even bothered to dress up properly, and yet he was demanding access to the top floor. He was lucky that he ran into the manager himself today. If he'd been dealing with one of his slow-witted underlings instead, with this incredibly casual student getup he was wearing, young Master He likely would have found himself denied entry. The manager thanked his lucky stars that he had been able to avoid such a scene of carnage. Given He Yu's unusual appearance and attitude today, this young man might actually end up tearing the place up if he was angered. Lead the way, He Yu said mildly, as he stuck his hands into the pockets of his jeans. The manager hastily bowed and said with a smile, Yes, yes. Come this way, young Master He. Well, I'm seeing a pattern here. That was chapter 48, titled Madness. When we come back on Wednesday, we will be on chapter 49, which is called Descent. I don't know how long these short chapter titles are going to continue, but I don't like them. So that was today's reading. How are we feeling about that? Because I'm feeling I am not feeling at ease. I'm very much not at ease right now. And I'm like, I can't wait until Wednesday because I really need to find out what happens, but I'm very concerned about what happens and yeah, all the feelings we sure are feeling. You're correct, Henry. So yeah, that was a lot, and I feel like it's going to continue being a lot. As you said, Nina, I suspect things will get more intense. Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Especially if... See, here's my thought. Xie Ching-chung is, like, on his way over to this club. So I'm like, he's gonna get there, and I guess he's gonna be like, hey, I'm looking for He Yu. And if they actually tell him where He Yu is, and he, like, tries to meet up with He Yu in this private room at the top, on the top floor, like, see, that's what I'm wondering about. Like, what is gonna happen then? So, um, with that, I guess I'm gonna go, and I will see you on Wednesday. Thank you for coming to the stream. Bye.